Okay, good afternoon, guys. How are you? My name is Jenny Castillo. Please let me know if you can see me well and if you can see the PowerPoint presentation in the screen for the people who is connected now, please. Okay, great. Thank you very much for your feedback. So we're going to start. The title of our webinar today is Following or Leading. Be the leader you need to be. So it's about leadership, how we can build our leadership skills. So we're going to change the format today a little bit. We're going to do, I am going to do a interview to an expert in that topic. So my interview, you can see him here a little bit. Say hi, Eric, please. Well, Eric is a super expert in topics of leadership and career development. We are colleagues at the Inter-American Development Bank here in Washington, D.C. We would work in human resources. It's a pleasure for me having him here and talk with him today about this interesting topic. So, we're going to start. But before we get started, talking about our topic leadership, will you share some of your background with our audience, Eric, please?
Jenny, thank you very much for this opportunity to be with you and your colleagues. Let me present my background in two different ways. One is it appears on my CV, and one is, I think, with insights into leadership. So academically, I have a number of degrees, including a doctorate. I've worked at universities as director of career centers at two different ones. I've been director of recruiting for a management consulting firm. I was a senior human resource officer at the World Bank Group, and now I'm a career counselor here at the IDB. From the leadership side of things, it goes way back to my high school days when I was a vice president in my youth group and on the national board. When I was at the university, I was vice president of a fraternity and organization. When I became a professional, I was president and national board member of my association. So I've had a number of experiences with leadership, and we're going to talk more about that. I'm looking forward to talking about this topic with you and your colleagues today.
Great, thank you. But when and how did you become interested in this topic of leadership?
You know, I've been actually thinking about that in preparation for today, and I guess it goes back to when I was a child. I enjoyed reading novels and biographical histories, and particularly about military leaders. But I also observed my parents, both of whom were active in professional associations and were leaders in those organizations. I studied leadership in college as part of my bachelor's, master's, and even my doctoral program. I've noted different leadership styles in the workplace. I've experienced in my professional association. I've been responsible for assessing leadership competencies in the workplace, and I've coached people who are managers and leaders. So I've had it from very different angles.
Okay, wow, great experience. So, okay, let's start with the basic definition of leadership. What is a leader, Eric?
Okay, leadership can be defined as a process of influence in which a person can enlist the aid and support of others in accomplishment of a common task. To do so, a leader needs to create an inspiring vision for the future. He or she must motivate people to engage with that vision and build a team and coach that team to be effective to achieve that vision. It's not dependent on a title or formal authority. A leader is not necessarily our boss. For instance, Lao Tzu, the ancient Chinese philosopher, is credited with a quote, "A leader is best when people barely know that he exists, not so good when people obey and acclaim him, and worst when they despise him. But a good leader who talks little, when his work is done, his aim fulfilled, they will say, 'We did this ourselves.'" I guess in its simplest form, a leader is anyone who has followers. Therefore, they are located throughout any organization, not just at the top.
Okay, very interesting. And are there different kind of leaderships?
Absolutely. Many different researchers have looked at this from different angles. So let's begin with one approach. They talk about three different kinds of leadership. This was research done by Lewin, Lippitt, and White many years ago. They talk about authoritarian leadership, democratic leadership, and laissez-faire. Most people are familiar with the first two words, democratic and authoritarian, but let's look at all three. So an authoritarian leader is where all decision-making powers are centralized in the leader. It permits a quick decision making, that's the good side, as only one person decides for the whole group. Examples of authoritarian leaders are obviously dictators, military leaders, and corporate bosses and corporate leaders. The democratic or participative style is where the leader shares with the group decision making, making for social equality. Examples could include task teams at work, informal groups, and even social clubs. The laissez-faire leader passes decision making on to all subordinates, who are given complete right and power to make decisions, to establish goals, and to work out problems or hurdles. This is sometimes called a leaderless team. Another type of leadership style is called the situational leadership. In this approach, there are leaders who focus on relationships and others who focus on task accomplishment. According to this model, there is no ideal leader. Rather, different styles of leadership are needed depending upon the specific situation as well as the maturity of the group. For instance, at times of emergency or transition or a newly formed team or a team that has new members, directing or telling style is better. But if a team has reached a highly developed level and takes initiative, the participating style is better and allows the leader to be part of the team rather than staying away from the team.
Wow, very interesting definition and a very interesting model, Eric. But sometimes leadership is confused with management, right? So can you tell us the difference between those?
Certainly. And I think you've hit upon a theme that does, in fact, confuse many people. So let's try to look at both sides of it. A manager is someone you have to follow. A leader is someone you want to follow.
All right.
A manager relies on control. A leader inspires trust. In a quote attributed to Peter Drucker, the guru of leadership studies, leadership is doing the right things, management is doing things right. So some descriptors that can be used when we talk about leadership would be words like vision and strategy, inspire, innovates, followers, charismatic. While words that are associated with management or manager
Okay. I think we had a little disconnection, but we're back. Could you please confirm, some of you, if you can hear me again and you can see the presentation, please? Yes. Okay, okay, perfect. So we're going to talking about leadership versus management.
Okay.
Please continue, Eric.
Sure. At the risk of perhaps repeating a few words here, just not sure when the cutoff occurred. So again, let me say, a manager is someone you have to follow, or a leader is someone you want to follow. A manager relies on control, a leader inspires.
Hi guys again. I'm sorry. I think the platform is failing a little. Okay. Hi again, guys. I think we're having problems with the platform, so we're trying to continue. But if the problems going on, I think we going to stop the webinar. But um well, let's try to continue. So we're talking about leadership and management.
Okay. So I don't want to repeat again here, but the descriptors or words that are sometimes used when talking about leaders would include words like vision and strategy, inspiring, innovating, followers, and charismatic, while words that are associated with managers are procedures, power and control, subordinates. So management tends to be seen as inherent in a particular position within an organization, while leadership is a relationship between persons. Some believe that unlike management, leadership cannot be taught, although it can be enhanced through coaching and mentoring.
Correct. And what would be some of the qualities most associated with leadership, for example?
Obviously, a great question. Wouldn't it be nice to have the clear profile of an ideal leader? Interestingly, in a Harvard Business School review article, the researchers presented that over the past 50 years, there have been over 1,000 studies being conducted to try to identify definitive styles or characteristics or traits of great leaders. Their findings, however, is that no studies produced such an ideal model. Well, that's good news, because that means you don't have to be born with a specific characteristic or trait, and therefore each person can work to become an authentic leader, not by copying another person's style, but by being themselves and working to develop themselves.
Okay.
Another perspective is the concept of emotional intelligence.
Yeah, very famous.
Right, a style made famous by Daniel Goleman. And he suggests 5 characteristics: self-awareness, knowing one's strengths and weaknesses; self-regulation, controlling otherwise disruptive impulses; motivation, that is having the desire for achievement; empathy, understanding other people and social skills; and building rapport with others. The first 3 of these are self-management. The latter 2 are managing relationships.
Okay. And who has leadership capabilities?
Yeah, that is the age-old question. People have been trying to figure this out for forever. If it could be predicted who has strong leadership capabilities, those persons could be encouraged to move into positions of responsibility. And conversely, those persons without could be kept away from those kinds of positions.
Right.
For instance, as we see on the screen, 3 great leaders of their time, Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, and Napoleon Bonaparte, have been studied very largely, and it has been found that all 3 of these individuals share 3 common traits. Those 3 traits are: all of them are short of stature, all of them are left-handed, and all of them had venereal disease.
Wow.
So for those listening who happen to be short of stature and left-handed and who thought they were on the fast track to great leadership, I would encourage you that the last of these common elements, you don't want to go there.
Right.
So obviously this is a correlation and not a causation.
Exactly.
But large organizations, whether they're corporations, government organizations, military, where strong leaders are needed, use many different approaches to try to find them. Typically, they will study those persons who have been identified or rated by others as strong leaders and try to find the background, the elements, the traits, the training, the types of experiences that may be common among those persons. Another way to understand it is to debunk the myth of the complete leader, that is, the flawless person who has figured it all out. That doesn't exist. So rather, ongoing development and learning and training and trial and error can help people move along the curve to stronger leadership capabilities.
Okay, is leadership something that employers or company look for candidates, for example?
Absolutely. I think in almost every organization that I've been a part of, or even those that I've studied, that they might have interview reports and things of that nature, leadership is something that's always being sought. Most organizations, either at the entry level or for hiring into upper level positions or for promotion, seek candidates who have demonstrated good leadership qualities. In fact, in a survey conducted by my own professional association, asked of recruiting managers, leadership skills were identified as the #1 sought ability, as agreed to by 80% of the respondents. But remember, leadership is not the same as management, so it's sought not just for the next cadre of managers, but rather because leaders are needed throughout the entire organization, and therefore the skill is critical for all in high-performing organizations. Employers may ask employers may ask as part of interviews about experiences of candidates. They may seek references from others. They may put candidates through assessment centers where they will have the opportunity to demonstrate leadership qualities in the exercises of those assessment centers, all intended to try to find individuals who have leadership qualities and capabilities.
All right. So with that understanding, what are some of the ways that our colleagues in the audience can build their leadership skills? How can we um, develop our leadership capabilities, Eric?
Great question and an important one. I would suggest 3 areas or 3 buckets, I call them: education, experience, and exposure. So what do I mean in each of these? Well, education, in this case, I don't mean just formal education, such as a degree, but rather learning about leadership through reading, workshops, conferences, etc. For instance, in the United States alone, there are many organizations that focus on leadership, from places like universities like the Harvard Business School to independent organizations like the Center for Creative Leadership, from trained centers such as Dale Carnegie to the American Management Association's programs. Reading about leadership, whether from historical biographies to textbooks, is another way to learn and understand leadership. Many universities offer courses all the way to certificates on the subject. Many organizations also offer leadership training programs. For instance, at my former employer, a consulting firm, we had a leadership development course. In it, we showed attendees a portion anyway, of a popular movie about World War II. When that segment was over, we asked them to notice the leadership styles, I should say, of 2 particular characters in the movie, and we used that Hollywood production as a jumping-off point for a discussion on leadership styles, what works and what doesn't, and why different styles work for different people in different situations. When we talk about experience, the second bucket, I mean both the formal environments of past and future which will unfold for you. From those both work and non-work experiences, you will have observed leaders, both those you would like to emulate and those you would want to distance yourself from. But even those negative experiences can have given you an insight. If you don't want to be like person X, how do you act to be different? Role models are very positive influences on us. I can recall from my own experiences many years ago, I observed 2 persons with a very different leadership style in the same environment. I tried to learn from both of them. What were the styles of the one that I wanted to copy? And from the other, how would I act differently so as not to be like that person? The third bucket I call exposure. And by it I mean the informal or unofficial learning environments. This could include things such as mentoring, working with a coach, volunteering for assignments at your workplace, all places and environments where you can practice leadership skills, where you can engage in experiences outside of work also that can test your leadership capabilities, such as volunteerisms, community organizations, social clubs, and other such groups. From both experiences and exposures, your goal is to try out and to further hone your leadership skills. It is always best to try to work on a new skill and develop that skill in an environment that is not overly critical to your livelihood. Thus, the idea of a volunteer environment to test those things out. Any mistakes you might make there will not cost you dearly, but instead will provide you with lessons to learn from.
Okay, well, those ideas are very nice and neat, but not necessarily attainable, in our sometimes academic environment. What are some others ways? What else you can recommend us to develop our leadership capability?
Certainly. I think perhaps another way to say it would be, where else can you learn about leadership and in what other environments can you practice it? Or better yet, when you are working to develop your leadership skills, what should you be doing? So
Right.
earlier I mentioned that there is no leader unless there is a follower, unless there's a group or a team.
Right.
So a leader needs to work with his or her team. One good recommendation is to treat your team as if they were all volunteers. Obviously, this applies most importantly in the work setting. Well, what do I mean? Volunteers vote with the power of their feet. They participate if they want to, and if they don't, they leave. So you have to keep them involved. An excellent way to keep your team involved is to ask them a very simple question: what do you think? In fact, those four might be the most powerful words that a leader can use. Again, what do you think? You should work both to inspire your team and to challenge them. If you're only challenging your team, you might be perceived as being a bully. So again, it's to inspire and to challenge them. When gathering a team together, diversity is a critically important element. If everyone looks the same and comes from the same background, they will likely all think the same, and that equals groupthink. So new ideas, different approaches, and ultimately successful endeavors come from the combined efforts of all involved. So involve others. So if you are a leader and you are assembling a team, look for diversity. Look to bring different people into the room that can be helpful. For instance, I recall a meeting I attended where the organization had invited to speak a management guru. He shared lots of ideas with the audience on how to turn the business around. One of those that really struck me was when he asked the audience, made up of middle and senior managers, how many people under the age of 30 are involved in setting strategy for the organization. He specifically called out age diversity to remind those in the room that everyone's opinion can matter, and a new idea can come from a person who has not been involved in the past. So consider that concept of diversity in all its ways. One trait that's very important for good leaders is to coach followers, to create the next generation of leaders, and then to empower them. A person is not a leader when she or he holds all the power and controls people by pushing them around. Rather, leaders seek new opportunities, and they create new opportunities for themselves and for others. Another trait found in good leaders, they don't wait for an official blessing. What do I mean? Well, they tend to believe in the theory of you don't know what you can get away with until you try. In other words, it's easier to get forgiveness than to seek permission. But they are realistic and prudent and not reckless, taking calculated risks once you have determined that moving forward is worth that risk.
Okay. Those are great, Eric, actually. But I don't know, maybe any others that you can think about it?
Sure, and we can generate some other ideas here. For instance, it's important to, when we emphasize the concept of leadership skills, that like other skills, they get better with practice. There are common concepts and skill development that can apply here as well. For instance, the sub-skills of leadership are many. What might some of those include? Well, caring about team members, communications, creativity, integrity and trust, motivating others, respect for others, and team building. These are all elements that make up for good leaders. And similar to other skills, these can be applied either too little, overused, or applied just in the right balance. And what do I mean by that? So if you are applying, let's say, team building, if you apply too little team building, you're not creating a common mindset. You're not creating the synergies that the team needs to move forward. You might be complimenting individual people and not the team as a whole. So that would be underusing. If you're overusing team building, you may be slowing down the process by having everything open for debate. It's going too far in hurting one person's opinion or one person's feelings, you say, and you don't make tough decisions along the way. But just the right amount of team building there might be to including blending people into the team, creating a strong spirit on the team, fostering open dialogue. A person, an individual who wants to grow as a leader, should be open to learning new ideas. But that goes without saying, since the members of our audience are all tuning into this webinar. They all seem to be interested in learning more about leadership.
Right.
Another very important thing to do is ask peers for feedback. You can ask them how persuasive or how influential I am. If you have engaged in a leadership role, you might ask them, how am I doing? Be open to their feedback and suggestions. Their feedback will help you uncover your blind spots, the areas that others can see in you, but you cannot see yourself. In learning, it's good to have a mentor or coach, someone who can give you insights and help you process the feedback you might be receiving from others. And just as you seek a coach, as I said earlier on, a new mantra for leadership is leader as coach. So approach your team in that spirit. You're trying to coach them to greater success.
All right.
A leader who sets the vision, you need to do that with conviction. Therefore, answer for yourself, what are you willing to stand up for and to fight for? Know what you value. Create a clear vision of the kind of leader you want to be and then live it.
All right. Do you think that is there a value in seeking role models, for example?
I believe so. As I mentioned earlier when I talked about the leadership style of the two persons that I had seen earlier on and what I wanted to emulate in one and move away from another. I remember a quote from a book I was reading on leadership that says, people seldom improve when they have no other model but themselves to copy. So there too, it's suggesting looking to others so that you are building beyond yourself. As you look for role models, you have probably noticed that in an organization, people will commit to certain individuals who on paper or even in the organizational chart possess little authority. And yet, they are the people who have drive, who have expertise, who have genuine caring for colleagues, and those are the individuals that others relate to. So think about how you have felt in the past when you were engaged with a leader who you admired. Even if you did not think of it at the time, try now to analyze that experience. And you will probably see that you felt engaged and energized by that leader. That leader provided you with a vision of what was desired and gave you a reason to believe in that future. But you know, there's something about leadership that many people talk about, which is that there's cultural elements to leadership.
Right.
So Jenny, why don't you share with our listeners, what are some of observations that you have had on leadership, considering that you have worked in and been in different environments where you've observed that context?
Well, sure. Certainly, I think that the leadership traits are very related with the cultural environment. For example, I think that here in America, it's very common that we can associate leadership with a very strong personality, with a very energetic person, very vocal person, right? Outgoing, extrovert people. That is kind of leader that we want to see here, in my opinion. More oriented to coach people, to guide people, with a role of coaching, very remarkable. But for example, in South America, maybe my colleagues from South America can say that a leader is more like a management, right? So you, like as you were saying before, it's more like just be sure that the things are done in the time and with the resources that they need to be done. But it's not so much like a leader, like this person that we want to follow. It's like more like a manager. But I think not only in South America, but in Europe and here in United States, the role of the leader, the role of a boss is changing a lot, and is much more oriented to this, coach role, to this guide, to this charismatic person that we want to follow. So yeah, definitely the cultural environment make a difference.
Right. And I would say for individuals who are currently working in a situation, in an environment, it would be very important to measure that environment, to ensure that they're familiar with what would work well there, what would be seen as a positive, and what might be frowned upon. But again, I want to reiterate the point I made earlier on, which is leadership is everywhere in an organization, not just at the top. I know I can recall one experience I had many years ago where I was the manager of an office, and I went to one of my subordinates on the team who was responsible for a particular project, and I asked her, how can I help you? And she said, but you're the boss. And I said, I know, but for this project, you are the boss. You're the one who's in charge. You need to use all the resources available to you, and I'm bringing myself to you, and I'm just one more resource for you. So I think it's helping, if you are in a leader position, not only to manifest your own leadership, but to encourage others that you are working with, that they can strive also to excel and develop their leadership skills further.
Yeah, totally agree, Eric. But okay, before we open up for questions and comments, do you have any last thought to offer?
Well, I think let me conclude with two different thoughts, and not really summaries, but nonetheless, I believe, kind of important ideas. The first is many people have heard of the concept of the authentic leader, and simply this means being yourself. You will not likely be successful if you're simply pretending to be someone else. You must believe in yourself and act in honesty. And I think a good way to end is with a quote that we see actually on the screen right now. It's been attributed to many different people, and so I'm not going to try to believe or claim to who it first was spoken by, but I'll instead just say the quote, which is, "Leadership is the art of accomplishing more than the science of management says is possible." So leadership is very, very powerful, and leadership can accomplish much, in fact, much more than others thought would be indeed possible given the situation, circumstances. So let's stop there, and let's take questions from people now.
Thank you very much, Eric, for your time and all this super interesting information. So please, the people who is online, just chat your questions. We have one.
Okay.
So the question for Eric is, you mentioned that it is easier to get forgiveness and seek permission, right?
Right.
Can you elaborate on that? I felt it's not what happens in day-to-day life. So this is the first question.
Yeah. It's a good one, and the quote is, I'm not exactly sure where I read upon it, but I think what is being mentioned by that is if an individual waits calmly for the permission to do something, to wait around to be asked to do something, you may be waiting forever. Instead, to take qualified risk and to move ahead with ideas, and it may require the asking of forgiveness later on, but otherwise you'll just be sitting waiting. It reminds me, I was just coaching an individual this past week, in fact, here at the IDB, who came to me because they were concerned that they weren't advancing their career in the way they were hoping to. And they, in fact, even spoke that other people seemed to be advancing around them faster than they were.
Right.
And I asked the person to think about what it was that they were doing or not doing that might have an influence to that. And one of the things that they were very proud of was that they were doing the work that was assigned to them at a very high caliber level. I said, great, but that's what's expected of you.
Right.
I then asked, what have you done that's out of the ordinary? What have you done that's not part of the expectation? And the person looked at me and said, well, I guess nothing. And I said,
right.
That's where it can come in. So the idea of taking calculated risk, identifying an area, a problem that you want to solve, an issue that's of concern to yourself and to your colleagues, and how can you take a leadership role in working to solve that issue?
Great answer, Eric. Thank you. The other is, have all great leaders a coach?
Excellent question. I think many do. I can't say all have, but I know that many do. And it's interesting because there is a perception that a coach is given to people who are having problems. And I would like to suggest we should look at it the other way around, which is people take on a coach when they're being very successful and they want to be even more successful. For instance, an example, a star athlete has a coach.
Right.
We just finished the Olympics. You could take any of those athletes involved in the Olympics. They all have coaches.
Right.
Those coaches are helping them see just the very fine point to make different. The management consulting firm I worked for, our CEO had a coach. He was the number one person in the organization, but he had a coach because he wanted to get better at one aspect of his responsibilities. So I think rather than seeing a coach as a problem, or that you're having a problem if you seek a coach, we should be seeking coaches because we want to enhance ourselves. We want to get even stronger and better than where we are now.
Okay, so we have to looking for a coach. Another question, I think it's a very interesting one. Do you think people are apprehensive to young leaders, for example?
I think one could probably identify that there are generational differences. It may be hard for older people just because of the generations they've been part of and what they've kind of come up through and their beliefs to believe or see that a younger person can be a stronger leader than they themselves are. But I think if individuals are honest with themselves, they will look and recognize that They want to associate with people who are positive influences at whatever age that happens to be.
Right.
And in fact, sometimes we can be in awe of an individual who is much younger than we are, and yet has the ability to influence us in such a positive way that we want to kind of attach that person and be with that individual.
Okay. Okay. And the other thing is, how can we assess or how can we know if we have received appropriate coaching to become a leader?
Wow, that's a really good question. I think the concept of a coach, and I'm going to put into the mix also the word mentor. There are two different things, but I want to identify them and use them in a similar character here, which is that the individual who's receiving the coaching, or the individual who's the mentee to the mentor, has the role and responsibility to decide if they are happy with the relationship and if they're happy with the other individual. And hopefully that the relationship developed between coach and coachee, or mentor and mentee, is one that allows for it to be separated, to be ended, if one party does not feel it's being successful to them. So I think if you are working with a coach, if you are feeling that individual is helping you to grow and to move toward goals and aspirations, then it's a positive situation. If you do not think that's going on, then maybe you ought to seek somebody else that might have a different style or different approach, or may work better with your personality and your attributes to help you move along. It should not be seen as a negative nor as a problem if you want to seek the ending of a coaching relationship and seek the establishment with a different person.
Okay, very interesting. And the last question that we have here is, what would be your top one tip to become a leader?
Oh, how can you put it all into one thought? To me, I would say it becomes a combination of wanting to be and having a particular vision that you want to execute on. And then with those thoughts in mind, it becomes how do you move ahead with that. But you have to have the personal desire to want to be a leader and to have a vision that you want to work with and to work on. I think many people, and I put myself in that category too, when I was much younger and I looked at other people, I said, oh, I want to be like that person, but I can't be like that person because I'm my person. I'm a different person than that individual. So I think we talked earlier about role models. I think it's important to have role models, but you take from individuals and you apply to yourself what you think fits, and you don't try to copy or mimic the entire personality of the individual. So I think, the bottom line, for a person who wants to be a leader, you have to have the drive to do it. You have to have a vision of something that you want to work on, and then you have to have the skills to engage with others, because again, as we said earlier on, there is no leader without followers.
Right. Okay. We have another question. Actually, is there any book or article that talk about leadership that you can recommend us to learn a little more about that topic?
Well, I think a couple ideas I'd share right off the bat. Number one, certainly you can do a Google exercise and Google the word leadership, and you get all kinds of readings and things of that nature. Going back to one's own university and seeing what are some of the texts that might be used in courses in leadership, etc. I have on my own shelf a couple that I think have some interesting attributes for. One of them that I mentioned earlier on is this research, this reprint, I should say. It's an article reprints from the Harvard Business Review. It's called the Top 10 Must-Reads on Leadership. And it's 10 different articles from different perspectives on the topic of leadership. Okay. So it's a very interesting anthology. Okay. I also have a book entitled Leader as Coach. And this one is designed, as I was saying earlier on, that an effective leader is coaching the members of her or his team to greater strength. And another book, and this is a much more recent one, it's called Super Teams. And the authors of this are Marciano and Wingrove. And they are talking about, we said about leader and team, and so they're talking about how to make a team a super team. And with it, they identify kind of 10 themes that a team can work on to heighten their strengths and their awareness. So I think that's also a good one. But there are many, many others. I think I recall there was an article in the local newspaper here in Washington, D.C. when President Obama went on vacation. What was on his reading list, that he was taking books with him. And so you can find things like that where individuals have their own particular books that they like or enjoy. But I think also is as I said at the very early on, I was influenced just in the topic of leadership by reading historical biographies. And reading about people, because that becomes an interesting way to understand how people faced situations and how they overcame differences and difficulties.
Okay, Eric, thank you very much for your time. Let me see if there is another question.
These are all great questions, so thank you all for.
Oh yeah, I mean they are like a thank you for your time. And if you have like a specific expertise in the super teams topic, that will be a great webinar for us.
Okay.
So
we can consider that if we can arrange for that again. I'd be happy to try to do so.
Yeah, so I just want to remind you that we are recording the webinar, and you can have access to it next week on the YouTube channel, I think. So yeah, our professional development team in EMA will send you the link if you are interested, just to review again the topic that we talk about today. So thank you very much for your time and for being here, and our special guest Eric, of course. So have a good sorry, a good evening, and I'll see you in the next webinar.